Welcome friends, I'm Random Gamer Riven, and today we're going to be showing you some of the many monstrosities that have lurked within the era of the Sega Saturn. There's me doing a slightly overdramatic voice, but welcome. This is going to be a quick series, seeing as how I've had to suffer Angelic Special 2 for the past few months now. And I wanted to actually go over some of the more European games that got released on the Sega Saturn that perhaps shouldn't have been. It's fair to say, although the Saturn had a surprisingly good library of great games, it did however have a few turkeys. Some of these turkeys are also on the PlayStation and some aren't. It's one of those things in the 32-bit era that there are a lot of very good games, there are also a lot of very, very bad games. And today we're going to take a look at one of the first ones Sega actually released on the Sega Saturn. And this horror is Blackfire, an interesting 3D chopper game that was clearly little more than a tech demo for the team to experience how to play with the Saturn. Unfortunately, while an okay looking tech demo, it really did suck as a video game, to put it mildly. In fact, Blackfire was so bad, despite being a US developed Sega game, Sega of Europe and Sega of Japan both elected not to release it in their territories. Fortunately, however, for us, very luckily, Virgin Interactive decided to pick up and release Blackfire in both Japan and Europe, and it's suffice to say, with decisions like that, it's no wonder Virgin Interactive ceased to exist these days. To be fair to Virgin, however, they did release another helicopter game, Black Dawn, a year later, which was a vast improvement over Blackfire. But still, neither Blackfire or Black Dawn were a patch on either EA Soviet Strike or the superb core design Thunderhawk 2 Firestorm. In fact, it's only ironic the fact that Blackfire was developed by a team called the Sega Away Team, as with the name like that, it makes you wonder if they were intending to develop games for other companies, perhaps to destroy their reputations. So what exactly is wrong with Blackfire? Well, to be brutally frank, everything is wrong with Blackfire. From the minute you first start up the game, you're treated to a so-so CGI sequence, which isn't too bad considering the era and when it was done, but you rapidly realise that once you start the game, the frame rate is appalling. Not only that, but the game is surprisingly complex, with a slightly over-complex control scheme and a heads-up display that if you don't have access to the manual, you ain't going to be able to make head nor tail of. This is one of the most bewildering elements of the game from the start, with the factor of grief with such a heavy heads-up display. In fact, reading the manual took me about 10-20 minutes to get to grips with the heads-up display and the controls, with key elements such as fuel, height and speed all being displayed on the dash. The problem is, however, that the frame rate is just crippling at the same time. And while there is a training mission to practice, there's no real guidance once you get in-game, so it's purely just getting used to the controls and heads-up display until you can actually master the game and clear a mission. However, neither of these are either helped by the graphics and draw distance, which are equally as bad. The graphics look like they've been textured on an incredibly early PC game and a bit borderline Amiga, with very minimal texturing and detail, and the odd contour for land, but nothing much is that indistinguishable, all just like one coloured blob from a distance. And the other fact is the draw distance. Enemies and the territory pop up at point blank range. It's like literally they weren't using the Saturn's memory at all. Everything just appears right in front of your face. With no draw distance, it's almost impossible to tell where the enemies are until they're right on top of you, shooting you. Which isn't helped by the weapon system either. Free-firing weapons is next to impossible, with them having almost no direct control. They just disappear into the distance, and you don't appear to be able to aim in manual mode. Your only option is to use the target mode, and literally the target mode automatically locks onto anything, and then as soon as you fire, you hit it, effectively taking out any skill with the weapons at all. Of course, there's the odd target. If you target too close to a weapon, you'll miss, but most of the times it's a surefire hit as soon as you lock on and shoot, which takes out any skill. Deletes any interesting types of combat. You're ending up just literally pressing Z button to target everything as you fly around. It doesn't make much fun. There's a variety of weapons, and this is also slightly annoying, as in order to take out airplanes and helicopters, you need the anti-air missiles. By taking out ground ones, you need the ground rockets. This would be fine if it wasn't for the relatively limited supply of ammunition you often get on every mission. So often you find you're having to save your ammo solely for the mission objective, as killing everything in sight will leave you with no ammunition in order to complete the mission. In fact, often I actually found it quicker to complete missions by simply flying to the objectives, ignoring everything else. Fortunately, there's actually a turbo button to increase your chopper speed, which enables you to boost away from the enemies. Although you'll be sparsely using this turbo thanks to the very limited fuel you get for each mission, which is another major concern. Each mission has a time limit, but this is pretty much irrelevant in all the earlier missions I tried, because your fuel would run out long before the time limit would ever expire. In fact, the fuel limit is so sparse you have to pretty much fly to your objectives fairly quickly. This isn't helped either by the fact that your radar is next to minimal. There's no in-game map, aside from what's shown briefly on the objective menu, and then once you're flying in-game, it's solely up to you to locate your targets. There's a small in-game radar, but this only has a very limited range. There's no guidance to where the objectives are directly until you're flying near them. Due to the fact that the maps are quite large and the fact that they repeat, so effectively you have what is an open world chopper thing, you can often spend 10-20 minutes flying around looking for your target. Although I say 10-20 minutes, I'm talking more 10 minutes till your fuel runs out and you crash and burn. Watching the death screen becomes quite a common occurrence as you look for your targets, and it becomes fairly boring after you kill one objective knowing you still have 2 more to kill and you're running out of fuel.
The oil rig facility's configuration. Command Authority has ordered you to fly a surgical strike into the heart of the rig.
This is compounded by the fact that the mission design is also purely kill targets, although bizarrely the mission objectives often conflict with what you're supposed to do in the mission. I had one mission where the mission objective told me I had to capture an oil rig, and it also gave the impression there were hostages on the oil rig that I needed to rescue, and I mustn't destroy the oil rig. Yet once I got in game, the only way I could complete the mission was destroying the oil rig, giving me a rather confusing objective and suggesting that whoever wrote the objectives planned for a slightly different game to what the end result was. In the end, the only civilians I could find were the odd, very funny looking air balloons drifting through a war-torn conflict zone, which was even more bizarre, seeing as I can't really imagine people would be going on a balloon trip while there's planes and choppers shooting at one another. With nothing in the way of ground troops, you're pretty much left just shooting very blocky tanks and helicopters. Graphically, as I said, it is pretty bad, and when you look at the textures, everything's just minimal. Overall, the package is just abysmal, and I came up on about my 5th mission in game when I had to find a sparsely array of trucks hidden around a winter mountaintop, which was just almost impossible to find as they were split into multiple groups, and the area was so large and with no direction I just had enough at this point. Blackfire does offer a range of camera views, however again these are next to useless thanks to the various draw distances as well. You can look beside, to the left, behind you and to your right, seeing as how you have quite minimal health and the only time you see enemies is when they're on top of you. The minute you see them, you know you need to get back into the main view in order to shoot them dead before they gun you down, and a relatively low health bar means that if you don't respond quickly you're going to get shot down yourself pretty speedily. All in all, there really isn't much redeeming features in the way of Blackfire's game at all, aside from the rather cool rock and roll soundtrack, but quite frankly you can probably listen to that on YouTube and not have to play this game at all. There's some voice acting and it's amusing to listen to, but it's nothing that can save this game. In fact, the only excuse you can have for owning this game is 1, I'm a crazy collector and just must have them all, or 2, I got it with my Saturn when I bought it. For the rest of you, you should have been playing Core Design's superb Thunderhawk 2 Firestorm, which is exactly everything Blackfire should have been. Fast, smooth, good camera angles, lock-on weapons that work correctly, and stray fire that also works correctly. Thunderhawk 2 is still well worth tracking down as it's a joy to play and still relatively cheap. Another superb choppered franchise is of course EA's own Strike series, and of course Soviet Strike did see a release on the Sega Saturn. It was a surprisingly high quality port from the PlayStation version, featuring a number of bonuses, and is well worth tracking down, not least because of the superb cutscenes that really help bring the game together, and some superb shooting action to match. It's as brutally hard as all the other Strike games, but still well worth playing. Which leaves you with the only one question: when such good chopper games were out there at the time, why was anyone buying Blackfire in the first place? Whatever the reason, it must have done fairly well for Virgin to commission a similar sequel in the form of Black Dawn, even though it's not by the same team and it's not a direct sequel as such. But regardless, they did a game that was similar, so it's a semi-sequel or a spiritual successor, I suppose. Either way, Blackfire is one of the worst games I played on the Saturn and not worth tracking down, so avoid at all costs. In fact, if you see one, you should probably just run for the hills. In the end, Blackfire is clearly one chopper game that crashed and burned on takeoff.